Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for turning out in such large numbers. We're not used to such a big audience. I'm glad there's enough people here to make an impression on this lovely room. My name is Gerard Mitchell, and I'm the chairperson of the Prince Edward Island Electoral Boundaries Commission, which is established under the Prince Edward Island Electoral Boundaries Act. And I'd like to introduce my fellow commissioners here. On my immediate right is Lynn Murray, QC. On my immediate left is Libby Shaw, and on my far left, Elmer McDonald. Our fifth member, Carrie Carpenter, is unable to be with us this evening. We sometimes don't have a full panel. We proceed as long as we have 3 members, and all of our proceedings are recorded, so any member who's not present can always go back and listen to the presentations that are made here. Now, we've come here this evening to hear from you people, and I'm just going to make a very few remarks to give you a little bit of background about what it is that we do, or supposed to do, and then we're going to turn the meeting over to you, the members of the public from this area, to make presentations, ask questions, or make submissions. The function of the Commission is to review the 27 electoral districts of the province and to make a report to the Legislative Assembly regarding any changes to the area boundaries and names of any of the districts. In determining the area to be included in fixing the boundaries of a district, the Electoral Boundaries Act requires us to take into consideration certain factors. First, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in particular Section 3, the right of citizens to vote. Secondly, we're to take into account data from the Register of Electors. Third, we're to look at the polling divisions from the most recent general election. Fourthly, we're to look at geographical features. Fifth, information pertaining to population. Sixth, community of interest. 7, municipal boundaries, and 8, public input at meetings like this. We're also to take into account any guidelines or criteria proposed for consideration by resolution of the Legislative Assembly. Now, the Legislative Assembly has not made any such resolutions up to this point, although there's a sitting coming up, I suppose, where they could. In addition, the Commission is allowed to take into account any other factors that it considers relevant. As part of the process, the Commission is required to hold public meetings such as this one throughout the province, and we have scheduled 14 such meetings. This is the 12th, I believe. The Commission is to make its report within 6 months of its establishment, so that would take us to somewhere around the early part of June. The recommendations of the 2004 Electoral Boundaries Commission, that's the last one, were not accepted by the Legislative Assembly. However, this is different this time. This time, the decision of this commission is binding on the Legislative Assembly, and the recommendations that we make will be the way the boundaries are for the next 3 election cycles. So it is very important for people to come to the public meetings like this and make their views known. Because you're the ones with the local knowledge that can help us make the correct boundaries for your areas and for all of the areas of the province. As I mentioned, these are not just boundaries for today that we're drawing, but these boundaries are intended to be the ones that last through 3 election cycles, so that could be 10, 11, or 12 years, I suppose. So it's important, and because of that we sort of bear in mind population trends, whether they be increases or decreases from the present numbers. The Commission has no authority to add to or subtract from the number of districts. That will stay at 27. We're only concerned with changes to the areas, boundaries, and names of those existing districts. Now, the last Electoral Boundaries Commission, when they went out to public meetings, they had no maps. And they told me they found that as a problem, in that it was difficult to engage the people who, in discussion, who came to the public meetings with nothing to look at or nothing to reference. So what we thought we would do in our early stages was to come up with a couple of sample maps. And you'll see on the wall over to my left 3 maps. One shows the electoral districts as they are, and the 2 others are sample maps that the Commission has drawn up to engage people like you in discussion about the boundaries. This Commission in no way is married to those maps. They're not proposed maps. They're just something to get you talking, get your ideas. The final map that we come up with could and probably will look quite different from either of those sample maps on the wall. Now, the 2 sample maps are colored, and the colored show the districts that we sort of made up. But you'll also notice that they have black lines on them, and the black lines show the districts as they are now. So if you look at the black lines and the colored lines, you can sort of see how we were adjusting. And I can tell you one of those maps is sort of based simply on numbers. And the other map, we kind of sat around and tried to come up with what we thought would be the neighborhoods involved in a district. You may tell us tonight that we were all wrong about that, but that's what we were trying to do. Now, changes are going to be necessary, and the reason for that is that we have about 100,000 voters on Prince Edward Island, and if we divided those by 27, we would come up with about 3,700 electors on average per district. And that average is important because the discretion that this Commission has is constrained by both the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and by the Electoral Boundaries Act itself. The Charter, which is part of the Constitution and therefore the supreme law of the land, requires that any deviations from equality or parity must be justified on the grounds that the deviation contributes to better government of the population as a whole, given due regard to regional issues within the population. The Electoral Boundaries Act, on the other hand, says in any case, no district can be more than 25% above or below the average. And right at the moment, we have 3 districts that are above or below the average. A couple of them are really far above the average. And there's probably close to half the districts that might well be considered as too big or too small. Because you have to keep in mind that the Supreme Court of Canada, in interpreting Section 3, the right to vote, of the Charter in the context of electoral boundaries, says that the only way you can deviate from equality is by showing it's justified in the name of more effective representation. Voter parity then is of prime importance. But the Supreme Court also acknowledges it's not the only factor to be taken into account. Effective representation is the goal of the game, and it often can't be achieved without taking into account countervailing factors such as geography or municipal boundaries, population growth and decline, community history, community of interest, group identity, minority language, and cultural representation. So while numbers are very important in establishing electoral boundaries, it's not simply a numbers game. At the end of the day, the goal is effective representation, and there may well be factors that justify a departure from strict equality. So that sort of sets the background and where we're sort of coming from and what we're saddled with. Now we'd like to spend the rest of the evening listening to your concerns, submissions, representations, and please feel free to come forward. And when you come, as I mentioned, these proceedings are recorded, so when you come to the mic, if you don't mind, please state your name. And if you have difficulty coming to the mic, we'll try to get the mic to you. Okay? So I know nobody wants to be first at these meetings to speak, but we'll invite someone to be brave enough to make that first move.
Good evening. I'm not shy.
Thank you.
Is my mic on? It is.
Yep.
Okay. My name is Eva Rogerson. I'm a former member of government. Know West Prince District quite well. I guess my concern in coming tonight, my main concern is the lack of, or the big reduction in voters in rural PEI. And I just wondering, now I understand that the commission is bound by the Electoral Boundaries Act. That's correct. That's what you said, was it? Yes, by all that. And in the two sample maps, the same district, the same amount of voters were used for both samples. Was there a reason to that?
That's the mistake.
Very same amount of voters were used for both sample maps.
I think that.
Yeah.
I think that when the maps were being reproduced, it was they used the same number of voters, but that is not accurate. The voters on version 3.1 in District 27, if you can get that 3.1 before you. Okay. I'm not sure what yours says, but ours says District 27 has 3,235 voters. And District 26 would be 3,292. Okay, and District 25 is 3,638. I believe the numbers are accurate online.
And on the wall.
And on the wall. But when these maps were being reproduced, version 3.1 had the proposed district population as the same as version 1.1, which is not accurate.
Because I think I took mine off the list on the computer because I was looking at the whole province. So I'll have to check and see based on my, because what I had for District 27, 2016 was 2888. Are you saying that's not accurate?
2888 is accurate for 2016.
Yes.
That's accurate. It's
okay.
just the sample map 3.1 is inaccurate.
Well, I think I have the right figures then. And as I reviewed, and I know your task is to treat everybody across the island fair. So I looked at all the districts across the province. But when I looked at from District 23 to 27, I did 5 in the east and 5 in the west first, because I was really looking at the rural component. And when I looked at District 23, for example, for the last 10 years, is the figures that I used a lot, and they had 92% of the required quota. But it looks like even at 92%, based on the sample figures, that they are now increased by 10 more percent. Then when I went to District 24, which was under by 3 points, it was 72%. And it was down 1 voter in the last...
It would be under by 28%.
Pardon?
It would be under by 28%.
By 20, yeah, it was over the variance by 3%.
Yes.
Was the point I'm trying
yes.
to
All
make.
right, yeah.
I'm just talking about over the
gotcha.
variance. And it's increased by 26%. So then when I went to District 25, it was at 89%, which again, under the new figures, with an increase of 13%. When I went to 26, they were at 94%. And under the new figure, they go to increase by 5 more percent, even though they were within the variance by a good bit. District 27 was just 78%, which again was running pretty tight. It was only about 3 points from being outside the variance.
When you're saying outside the variance...
Outside the 25%.
Outside the 25%.
Yeah, they're well within the 25%.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So when I looked at the recommendations, it looked like in those 5 districts, we would lose 3,201 voters. But yet, the reduction in voters, when I totaled those, on the other side, we've dropped 578 voters in the last 10 years. So I thought that was a very large variance. So it seemed like, although I know we don't want to be at the extreme of the 25%, but when you're up around 92%, I wondered at why, even when you were a good bit over, you were still increased by a lot. Then I looked at the other 5 districts at the eastern part of the province, and District 1 was at 82%, which again was still a little above what's allowed. They were increased by 19%. District 2, which was 96%, it was increased another 5%. Then when I looked at District 3, they were running 82%. They were increased by 20%. Now, you can correct me later on if these are wrong, but I put a lot of work into this. District 4 was at 83%, and they were increased by 21%. District 5 was at 92%, and they were increased by 10%. So they were going to lose 2,700 voters. I looked in the last 10 years on the reduction in their voters, 678. So when I looked at both of those, knowing we don't want to be right on top of the variance, and I looked at, if we went forward 10 more years, was this realistic? You know, those are the kind of things I looked at. Mm-hmm. So then I looked at all the other districts across the province as well. I did the same formula for each one. And as I looked down through them, for example, could I get a drink of water? That's okay. I got one. I'm kind of a numbers person, and I realize you're trying to put a balance to this, but when I see over 3,000 people at a rural PEI, and our voice is our MLA now. I should just add this while I'm taking a break here. As a former member of the Western School Board, which we no longer have, as a former chair of West Prince Health, which we no longer have, and I helped coordinate the Red Cross swimming lessons for 37 years, helped to do all the bus runs, had chair ladies in each district. Now we pay a young lady to drive from Charlottetown to register our kids for swimming. our volunteers aren't needed anymore. So trying to volunteer and be interested in your community, and it seems like your voice keeps getting diminished and diminished. When I saw over 3,000 people again, and the challenges of representing, because we are so far away. I know when I was an MLA, 3.5 hours to get to the legislature. Very interested in the legislator committees. Many days you would travel the same. The district then was from the, when I checked the kilometers from Glengarry to Inmore, 42.2 kilometers to get from one side of the district to the other. Then if I went to Inmore, it was over 32 kilometers. And just from Glengarry to West Point was 21. So again, this is why I really think that we shouldn't be at 1 to 4% variance, which is what it looks like in most of the options. And I stand to be corrected. But that's the kind of stuff I was looking at.
So you're saying, I take it, that you would consider it more difficult to be a rural MLA or more difficult to serve your district if you're in a rural area?
A lot more time out of your district. I know there was nights after a long day. I remember one night falling asleep at Maritime Electric because I had to stop and have a sleep about midnight. So for whatever government, I really feel as a rural MLA, and when I look at the bridges and the roads and the streams and all the primary industries, and like I say, in some areas, and even the schools, when I went to Elmsdale last night, I was really saddened to think we no longer get into these schools to talk to the teachers and the principals and the school councils. That's gone. So I really feel our voice is getting diminished more and more all the time. I don't want to take up all the time here tonight, but I'm very concerned about the island as a whole, but the area where we work and travel in. But anyway, as I looked at all the districts, because nobody wants to be 144%, like I think it's District 6. When I looked at District 1, it was 82%. Now it's increased by 19 more percent. 2 was 96%, increased by 5 more. I know I'm repeating myself on these first few. District 3, proposed 102, was 82%, an increase of 20%. District 4 increased by 21%. District 5 increased by 10. And yet those were all within the variance. And then when I go down through, and I do see District 6, 144%, which is not correct, or not accurate, or I shouldn't say it's not correct, which really needs to be adjusted. I go down to 7, where I see it was at 98%. It's now going to increase by 3%. District 8, which was 104, is now proposed to be 103%. District 9, 136%, down to 101. These are the ones that need to be decreased. District 11, which was 91%, will now be 98. District 12 was 80, going to be 99. 13, 85, which is going to be 99. 101, which is going to be 99. 120, let me see, District 15, which is now 123, which is, again, is quite high, going to be 96. But as I go down the line, every one of them in rural PEI, and I can see where there can be some adjustments made, but it looked like most of the percentages ranged from 1 to 4%. So is it the goal of the Commission to keep the variance at that level? Like most of the changes was keeping each district between 1 and 4%.
Well, the role of the commission, if you like, is to come up with boundaries that that are fair and as equal as possible, taking into account things like you and I were talking about a moment ago, like maybe it's more difficult to represent a rural district, and therefore a rural district should be allowed to be a little bit smaller. That's a factor that we have to that we would be bound to consider. So whereas let's say 3,700 might be the number if all things were equal, but right. If we look at a remote rural area, we'll say we might come to a different conclusion about that, because we'll say, well, you know, they have no town councillors. It's difficult to get around in that community, and it's harder to work rural communities than urban ones. That might be a factor that would lead us to conclude that the number should be something different than the equality.
Okay, well, that's what I was hoping, because when I looked at, and it seemed like in those larger areas where, you know, let's say the Charlottetown area where they have a lot of immigrants, out here we have a lot of immigrant workers that are not recognized yet. It's looking like they might be moving to be able to, some of them have permanent status, which they would like, and I know there's quite a few that works in the fish plants here in the West. There's a lot of workers that works with the strawberries, and so
but you have to take into account that we just deal with voters.
Yes,
and
that's
a lot
correct.
Of immigrants, they may well become voters someday, but they're not necessarily voters at this time.
So in your 10-year projection,
yeah,
that's what I was wondering.
They have to be a factor.
So they would be a factor if you're
they
projecting.
Should be a factor to the extent that, you know, it's not easy to project that far
Well, that's
ahead.
for sure. I know. That's for sure. So I guess that was my concern today, is on the variance in areas, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot more information on this, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but that was my concern, that it looked like in the proposed boundaries, the variance was running from about 1% to 4% either way. Now that's
well, again, and we always pick up on people who say that in the proposed maps or the proposed
sample. I know
that we use them samples. That we're not proposing them really. We just use them for to get people like you discussing this.
Okay. Well, thanks. I'll let somebody else come to them.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Buchanan, and welcome to West Prince.
Thank you.
I have in my notes here some stuff that I really do not know if it's relevant tonight or if it's not relevant. I know part of it is relevant because you said it was relevant a few minutes ago in your introduction. So I'll do my brief presentation, and not being as learned on electoral issues as the panel would be, I will forgo any questions, I think, tonight in provision of answers. So I was really pleased to hear that this is more than just numbers. And so I'll just read this, as I get very nervous at these events. So
sure, take your time.
bear with me. Firstly, a comment must be made regarding the complexity of this realignment of districts and its potential impacts on rural towns, villages, and communities. The process is not a simple means of numerically ensuring each district has an appropriate number of electors. However, each geographic area has a socioeconomic and cultural vision that must be considered as significant variables in your deliberations. Historically, our communities within West Prince have had a very strong focus on leadership and resident involvement in many of its organizations. However, over the past 2 decades, an evolutionary erosion has occurred with many of the organizations and systems becoming centralized and or eliminated. Therefore, it is found that these changes have limited and/or restricted input and feedback to the decision makers on matters important to the residents of the West Prince communities, leaving a general feeling of powerlessness. And I think Eva did a fine job of pointing that out tonight in discussing volunteers. And having sat on provincial boards, nonprofit boards, it is darn difficult to really represent a geographic area, so I admire those that do. Unfortunately, examples can be given where residents have not only had to combat access for limited local resources, but also combat attitudinal and value differences in accessing what has become provincial resources. This is truly unfortunate. And a common saying here in our community is, water does not run uphill. What is hoped is that this realignment process respects the fact that community differences does exist within the shores of this small island. Within its geography, villages, towns, and incorporated communities attempt to provide a level of community involvement in the decision-making of the provision of the range of resources and services to its residents. It needs to be noted that the West Prince community does not possess an equal tax base as its larger urban centers, does not have the same access to provincial federal employment or private job opportunities as residents of larger urban centers, does not have similar access to public transit as residents of larger urban centers, and it goes on. Therefore, the importance of provincial balance is required, plus a general appreciation and understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses, urban and rural. For example, farming and fishing are significant industries here. They are complex businesses requiring specialized skills and knowledge, plus specialized technologies. It is very important that these industries are understood and appreciated. In summary, the PEI Electoral Boundaries Commission must consider many variables, one and only one of which is population size. It must be recognized that the realignment process must not be another element or process to lessen our rural communities' capacity to be sustainable and a vibrant place in which to live and to work. On PEI, our elected district MLAs have historically played a significant role in the day-to-day life of our communities. Therefore, it is imperative that should a district need to expand, that the change respect the identity of the affected community. A balance must exist whereby the MLA has a provincial voice to outline the various needs of their district and able to acquire the appropriate resources to meet the needs of their electorate. So I guess in summary, my comments is a real wish to maintain a rural lifestyle and a sustainable community, and it exists beyond just numbers by itself, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McWilliams.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ronnie McWilliams from West Cape, and I'm just a farmer. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. In your opening remarks, you said that there are some areas that are guaranteed a district and that there are other circumstances which could be considered that the variance could be stretched a little ways. And my comments are more directed at the economic development, at the economic situation of the island. And I think that rural PEI needs to maintain the present number of districts at any cost, that being the rural districts. And in the comments that what was made there, for better representation. We have learned over the years that the economy of PEI is driven by agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. Let me talk a little bit about tourism and its connection to rural PEI. When a cruise ship docks in Charlottetown, many people will walk the streets and make purchases at various shops, while some get on buses and tour rural areas. I live in an area where many people from all over the world will stop and take pictures. They comment on the beauty of rural Prince Edward Island. Tourism officials agree that a tourist likes to see a cow eating grass in a field beside the water with a lobster boat in the background. And this is available only in rural PEI. Rural PEI is very busy in the tourist season. There are many halls, local halls, which offer local entertainment. Some are listed as festivals of small halls and draws crowds from all over. And a lot of these people that do the traveling and stop and take pictures, they also buy gas, and they buy accommodations, and they're also supported by tourism is the many eating establishments, of which many are seasonal. These all hire local staff, and this adds to the economy of rural PEI as well as the whole economic development of PEI. In the tourism ad, Anne of Green Gables says she couldn't improve on the scenery of rural PEI. Now that's an ad that was just on television about a week ago. There's a lot of tourism revenue generated in rural PEI, and we have to maintain as many rural MLAs as possible. With regard to fisheries, fisheries and aquaculture has a value of about $400 million and is 3% of the GDP and employs more than 8,500 people in the peak season. These numbers were taken out of an article in the journal Pioneer, I think is when the fisheries associations were heading to the fish show in Boston. Fishing and fish processing is now a year-round business and is based mainly in rural PEI. The MLAs are approached to have roads repaired and provide parking spaces, mainly for the spring fishery, the oyster fishery. They've had a lot of problems with roads and getting a place to park their boats, their trucks and trailers while they're fishing. So the rural MLAs are approached to look after those circumstances. Although wharf repairs and dredging is a federal responsibility, our local MLA is usually called upon to lend support. Now with regard to agriculture, this was taken, this comment was taken out of the Island Farmer, which I have a copy of if anybody wants to refer to it. This is comments. Farming is not an occupation. It is a vocation that goes back to the beginning and source of civilization. Without agriculture and fisheries, there would be no civilization. This point was made by Rex Murphy. I imagine you've all seen him on the national news. It was made at a recent FCC forum in Moncton, New Brunswick. And like I said, I have the comments that he made in the paper that I got with me. He commented on the closure of the cod fishery in the 1980s, saying that when he talked to people in urban areas, they failed to grasp the impact it would have on the economy. But the letters received by the news agency showed that the farmers of Western Canada, who were helped by the Eastern Canadians during the 30s, they understood what the impact would be. The comments can be found in the March 22nd issue of the Island Farmer. Now, with regard to agriculture, another comment. There's a lot of support. The beef plant in Borden-Carleton, which has been controversial over the time, has been supported by local MLAs, and it being many people and services and rural PEI is in the form of wages and purchasing cattle, which adds to the income tax, as well as wages and the economic benefits of it, the spin-offs, the people traveling to and from work. Other employers, major employers in PEI, are potato packing facilities, potato processors, one being Cavendish Farms, The others being W.P. Griffin Incorporated up west here, and you know, there's other major rural businesses. Also, our manufacturing companies. One of them that sells worldwide now, recognized all over the world, is right here on the Western Road, Trout River Industries. As you might have read in the paper before, just recently there were 40 trailers built right here in Carleton that went to Jordan. So there's over 100 people working there. Those people depend on rural PEI. Like the staff comes from PEI, and they need, like, these people live in the rural PEI, and they need representation. And the starting board of that Trout River Industries was H.F. Stewart in West Point, and they, in the past, have rural people from rural PEI working as staff, and they have shipped equipment to Russia. So there's been much talk about voter turnout in elections. Some of the issues are confusion in regard to poll boundaries and polling stations. An example, in District 25 is poll number 4. I have a map that I can illustrate that to you. And the boundaries, like when you come out the Nauvoo Road and come to Route 14, instead of going right to the Northumberland Straight, they take a detour up the road and go down Paradise Lane. And that affects about 6 voters. And that affects how far they got to drive to vote. I mean, they're right across the road from their neighbors, and they got to go that much further to vote. Another example is in the West Point area, being the Coogan Road. The people are within eyeshot of the polling station of the other poll, and yet they can't go there and vote. They have to drive 20 miles to get to O'Leary. So there's some things that could be made easier for the voters, and you know, be made more convenient and less confusing. And you may be concerned about the number of voters per poll, but there are a lot of people these days that vote in the advance poll. So, you know, and we don't know how many. If it's seasonal, well, there'll be a lot of people in those polls who will vote in the advance poll. And like the last election, the advance poll was bigger than any regular polling station. Am I correct? In conclusion, okay, there's another one here. And with regard to the districts, like 3.1 version is more acceptable. 1.1 is basically not acceptable. That, you know, even to vary it a little bit, I mean, you got O'Leary is basically in 2 different districts. Yes, there's a O'Leary is colored in, but when you go behind the potato warehouse in O'Leary, you're in another district. So, you know, some of the things that you've commented is that you have to keep the district to have a commonality with the people it represents. And you have to take an area bigger than a width of a street out of O'Leary to make it, you know, to make sure it has the same common interest as the rest of their area. And, you know, with that one there, you're splitting, with 1.1, you're splitting the West Point Fire District in 2, which is not acceptable. Like, you know, there's areas that you should maintain as a unit. And yes, if you go to 3.1, you're going to be splitting the O'Leary Fire District in half. But you know, right now we're split because, you know, this side of the Western Road down in Coleman is in a different district, but it's also in the O'Leary Fire District. So there's comparisons like that we should try to maintain as close as possible. And when one of the comments was that it's for better government, you want to divide these up for better government and better representation. So In conclusion, I would suggest that you maintain the current number of rural districts by extending the variances for better representation. You know, by looking at the 1.1 there, you're eliminating one rural district and combine it with, making it urban. A lot of your urban people, they want to move to the country. And, the rural population is decreasing, but your urban area is getting bigger, thereby increasing the population of the urban area. But these urbanites in certain areas are infringing on our rural identity. And still, they want the feeling of being rural. They want to be removed from the urban area. So we have to try to keep a balance of legislators in our province. We have to try and maintain a rural representation in the MLAs of the province. So anyway, if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And if you, like I said, if you want me to show you in that map, the map what I'm talking about, or the comments in the Island Farmer, I have them here. And
well, one thing I'll ask you about, what do you think, you sort of brought it up there, about using roads as boundaries? Sometimes you have, as you said, people on one side of the road there in District A, and their neighbor across the street is in District B. Do you see that as being a problem?
Be inconvenient. I must say, I go back to, my mother did the enumeration years ago, and we had to write the boundaries out by hand, and we had to list them all alphabetically and write it all out by hand too. Some of the boundaries were listed as the back of the farms located, that fronted on the O'Leary Road, and some of them were lot lines. But with regard to that Nauvoo Road, I mean, that definition used to go go straight to where it intersected with the Northumberland Strait. Yes. Now, with regard to the one I mentioned in West Point, well, there's no problem for that to come down a certain road and to the river, just to say, or there's another road that goes through there. But yes, you have to take road boundaries in certain cases, but don't twist them around and make 4 or 5 miles out of the way. Can you not just run them straight to intersect with, a body of water, a lot line? It was done in the past, and I mean, yes, today you got under the civic numbers, you got your enumeration now can be done by civic numbers. There will have to be some done by road boundaries. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Who's next? Yeah, it might be, yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Joe Prophet. I'm a resident of District 27. I think for this process, we must ask ourselves, what is the real intent? It's more than an exercise in mathematics, as we heard from some of the speakers earlier. More than moving electoral polls from one district to another. It is a process to ensure the citizens of this province are not advantaged or disadvantaged by the size of their electoral districts. Too often, I think we may lose track of our true goals in favor of making an outcome that looks good on paper. The previous boundary line process clearly put many residents in my district of Tignish-Pamerode at a disadvantage by drawing a dividing line through many communities, such as St. Louis, St. Edwards, and Mimigash, and splitting their residents between 2 districts and 2 larger communities of Tignish and Alberton. I'm happy to see that the two proposed maps would correct this issue for these specific communities. The ability of a community to speak with one voice and not have their issues overshadowed by larger communities or urban centers is of a greater importance than the specific electoral districts in which they reside. The new boundaries suggested by this committee do look good on paper. The number of electors in each district moving ever closer to the mean, yet there does not appear to be as much concern placed on the issues that really matter to me or to the members of my district that I represent. Issues like geography and communities of interest. I am concerned with the effects the proposed maps will have on the voice of rural islanders in this province. Rural districts cover a much larger area than those in urban centers, and as a result encompass a much more diverse economy, a broader range of issues for the electorate, and a much larger workload for our MLAs. Our rural areas include our primary industries of farming and fishing, but also manufacturing, tourism, service industries, and increasingly new industries such as seaweed processing and aquaculture. These industries, some of the main job creators and tax resources for this province, are widely scattered across each rural district compared to our urban districts, and are not easily understood by all of our urban residents. Residents of rural areas also require many more resources from our MLAs than our urban counterparts. We have few local councils to oversee local issues such as building permits, highway access, road maintenance, bridge repair, snow removal, other services. And where we do, many of these communities do not have the tax base to provide a level of service that's any comparison to the larger centers like Summerside or Charlottetown. Any issues in these areas become the local MLA's problem to correct. I do not believe our province is well served by making our rural electoral districts larger in size. We have watched over the last decade while our rural areas have seen a constant erosion of basic services, how our provincial government has implemented a policy of centralization, removing locally elected school boards, boards of health, the loss of hospitals, emergency services, local access to government programs, and now possibly even our local schools. As a rural islander, it is becoming harder and harder to have our voices heard in Charlottetown. There are many communities of interest in this province, from our native communities, Acadian communities, which make up a large part, and Acadian communities too make up a large part of my district, to our smaller local economies that depend on our primary industries to survive. Each community with its own special needs and circumstances, each one having a voice that is easily drowned out by the masses, and needs that fall sometimes on deaf ears. As a former provincial election candidate, I have seen many of these issues firsthand, and I know how hard it is to canvass a rural district. I've seen the issues the members of my district face every day and the struggle they have to have their voices heard. We are already seeing some changes, and these changes are beginning to increase the population in rural PEI. Higher prices in our primary industries, creating new business opportunities, changes to the employment insurance program to make it easier to survive in a seasonal economy, reduction in oil prices, contributing to many islanders moving home from the western provinces, changes, as was mentioned earlier, in immigration policy to make it easier for foreign temporary workers to gain status in Canada. And as was mentioned earlier too, my district is one of the biggest, with our fish plants, one of the large foreign workers. In closing, I'm asking you to consider the rights of rural islanders, the rights of our smaller rural communities, and to consider the widest possible variance when deciding the new electoral boundaries, to ensure rural islanders, their contributions and their issues are not overshadowed in their districts or in their government, that our voice is not disadvantaged, and that this panel's decisions do not contribute to the growing rural-urban divide before the next phase of electoral reform is allowed to take its course. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get a count?
Good evening. My name is Yvonne Wedge, and I'm from District 26. I'm not going to add anything to what Eva and Joseph has talked about because I agree with everything they said. I just strongly hope that you will take all that stuff into consideration. Joseph and I share a road, and also I share a road with District 25. So
Say that again. You share a road?
a road in our district.
Yes.
There's one road, one side is District 26, one side is District 25. And it's the same with District 20.
You mean you're just across the road and you're in a different district?
Yep.
How do you feel about that?
It's pretty confusing. It's confusing.
Would you like to see it
I would like to
so
see
that all the people
whole
on,
one
on
road.
a road are in the same district?
Yes, I would
In other
like to see
words,
that.
not use a road as such for a
That's
boundary.
right. You can use the road, but use both sides
Use
of the
something
road.
off. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I get you to wait just one moment, please? I would, as I listened to Mr. Prophet, he left, excuse me, he left quite quickly. I didn't get a chance to direct the question to him. But since you were both familiar with the area, is your feeling that for the variance to be larger for the rural community, for the rural districts, than, shall we say, the urban? You heard the chair speak about the attempt to sort of get a figure about 7,300 across the board. Now, that's going to be an impossible task, I guess. But nevertheless, if you take 37, yeah, 37. Thank you, Libby. No. Nice fellow, just not that smart. Anyway, do you think the variance should be larger for the rural? And we've heard other speakers say about it being much more difficult
Yes,
to
I
serve
think,
the constituents.
I think it would have to be larger in order to make things better.
Okay.
Yes. More
Thank
than
you.
3 or 4%.
Sort of to accommodate the greater difficulty in serving that area.
That's right.
Good evening. I'm Dave Pizio. I'm chairperson of Greenmount Montrose. And I just have some questions for you. First of all, I want to recognize the demands on you fellows mentally, physically, to prepare and meet the mandate. It's daunting. It's daunting. And of course, every time you meet at the town hall, you're receiving input, good, bad, and indifferent. But I just want to recognize that I understand the physical and mental demands of what's being placed upon you to do this for the betterment of the people of PEI. Mr. Chairman, I know at the beginning, and I think I missed it, but could you go back to the the process of what we're doing, what you're doing right now, until it actually becomes legislated? Because you had mentioned in 2004 it was not accepted, but you said it's going to be bound this time, and I didn't quite understand that.
In 2004, the Electoral Boundaries Commission only had the authority to recommend, and then the legislature either accepted it or it didn't. It didn't in 2004. But after that, the Legislative Assembly changed the law so that it now is required to accept the recommendations that this commission makes.
But they still can turn it down, correct?
No.
So with your final recommendation, when it goes to the legislature,
Yep.
they must accept it.
Yep.
and that will become law.
Unless they were prepared to change the law again, I suppose. But
at this point in
apart
time,
from that, but as it stands now, they must accept our recommendations.
okay, it just seems it's quite extreme, because when it's all done, there's no coming back.
No, that's why when we go out, we try to tell people, make your case to us, because there's not likely another forum.
Okay, and you said that the results of this with your mandate is for how many elections ahead?
3 election cycles.
Okay. My question to the panel is, have you taken into account the new MGA, the new Municipal Government Act?
No, we haven't specifically. I mean, some people at these meetings have talked about the new Municipal Act and how it's going to be a factor, but
well,
we take it into account, and of course, when we look at, there's 73 or 75 municipalities in the province, so everywhere we go, we hear about these municipalities and how we should observe these boundaries and so on.
Well, as you said, part of your mandate, it said municipal boundaries, but with the new MGA, what they're looking at as the proposed ideal municipality is 4,000 people and 250 million in assets. That is contrary to your variances and such. So, and this new act is going to, the proclamation of it is expected at the end of this year, and there's a 5-year transition, and right now we are battling with that as a small municipality because of what it's going to do to us.
But you say us, who are you talking about?
The small municipalities.
Oh, all small municipalities?
Yes. Okay. We will be financially crippled as a result of it.
Okay.
And we know that right now there's another program coming out about finding out about culture and that in the communities. And as you've heard from the other speakers, there seems to be an emphasis of wanting to maintain the cultural integrity of our communities. And the electoral boundaries, they have an effect, of course. But I find there's a concern that there is an entity working towards something in the way of the new MGA. The electoral boundaries, your mandate, they're not marrying up. Yet your mandate, when it's done, once it's recommended, that's it for those elections for the next 3 years, which is going to be passed after the 5-year transition period of this new MGA. So, and right now, again, with these new boundaries, there's going to be, what I see, an effect. We all understand what's happening right now with our schools, but I find it very concerning that there is such an aspect of trying to maintain cultural integrity within our small communities. And nobody denies that. Everybody actually absolutely agrees with it. So one of the things, again, the complexity of community structure as it's being affected by this new MGA and the electoral boundaries, as you've heard. One question I would ask is, has there been a common theme of concern? This is your 6th or 7th?
This is our 12th.
12th. God love you. Has there been a common concern of the rural ones you've had and the urban ones? Could you give me or tell us, has there been a common concern from those?
I think a common concern, if there is one, is in the rural areas to keep the communities, the proper neighborhoods together.
Okay.
That's one we hear in the rural, and of course the other one from the rural is that it's more difficult to be a representative in a rural area because of distances to travel and all of that sort of thing. That's common. In the urban areas, urban say they really want to be within their own boundaries, and they don't want to be in mixed districts. And they don't talk much about that in rural, but I gather the feeling is kind of mutual in that. So those are the sort of themes that we've been getting. Now, some of our meetings that we've had are not nearly as well attended as this one, very sparse in some cases. But at every one of them, I must say, we pick up at least a germ of useful information. I think if I pick out 2 or 3 themes, maybe that's the ones I just gave you.
I fully appreciate, sir. What we're hearing then, which is good for us to hear, is the aspect of the community identities in the rural areas must remain intact.
Yeah, that seems to be very important. Every rural meeting that we've had.
One last question. Have your panel received any input from the Federation of Prince Edward Island Municipalities?
No, not as such. Now, we've written or contacted municipalities to ask them to let us know about developments and so on in their areas. Some have responded and some have not.
Okay. No, I just want to, again, thank you for your time. And I ask again that you take from what you've heard so far is the integrity of the community culture of the small municipalities and the rural community, that the electoral boundaries are not going to compromise that end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, would you mind addressing another question I've got? In the areas that we're talking about tonight, the districts, what would be the area that you would give the greatest chance for increased numbers to sort of settle in the area in the next three elections? Next 10 years, shall we say?
You're asking me?
Yes.
You're asking me. Well, I guess I have to stop and think about that, but I was going to ask first, is there a deadline for written submissions?
Well, no, there's no deadline as such at this point in time. However, the sooner we get them, the better.
Yeah.
So, we do have a deadline, and that we have to report towards the end of May, or so.
Okay, so at
so
least
we
before
can
the
get
end
them
of April.
before that.
Yeah.
That's better.
I plan to send mine to Paul.
Yes,
so
that'd be correct.
So sorry to interrupt you there, Mr. McDonald, but again, I want to thank you so much for coming and listen to us. But I'll take your question again now, see if I can get my head around it. I was thinking my mind was going another.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't have the right to.
No, that was
interfere.
fine. That's fine.
But in this whole process, we're trying our best to get an indication when we're trying to draw districts about the potential for certain districts to grow. Last night we had the meeting in just down the road a little place, and it was interesting to note that the Lennox Island area is an area that they could have some growth, and the Greater Tyne Valley area is an area that would have some growth. So I'm just wondering, in the districts that we're talking about here tonight, what district would you say would have the greatest potential for growth?
Well, when I looked at the stats here, it looked like, for example, District 26 had increased, it hadn't decreased, and there's been a lot of housing gone up in that area. And in District 25, they're in the process of looking at putting up, like say, more seniors accommodations for different levels of care. And at the same time, we have some of the immigrant workers in that area that some of them are hoping to get a permanent status. And I know from looking at even District 26 and 27, they as well have a lot of those workers. So I think there's potential in each area to grow some. But just without any of that, I do see that the District 26 is one that has increased in the last 10 years by a small amount. So we're hoping. We haven't lost ground really bad, but that's where I was concerned when I saw from District 1 to 5, where we had dropped 678 voters, and with one of the proposed maps, we were losing 2,700. And then in the 5 districts in the west, we were losing over 3,200 voters, and actually we had dropped 578 in the last 10 years. So it just seems like a wide variance it looked like the average was more around 100 or 103, 104%. It didn't, I thought we could go a little further than that in our variance and not have such a wide gap in changing our districts. So thank you very much. Sorry.
Say the last census to now. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but from 2011 to 2016, both Kings County and Prince County have lost a considerable chunk of population. What do you see accounts for that, and how would it be reversed?
So this was in the census, not the
Yeah, no, I'm talking in the census.
In the census.
Yeah. It seems to be like an accordion going on, you know, people are moving.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I'll come to you in a minute.
Yeah.
I'll let her
Well,
answer.
a lot of people, I know there's been, I'll say, some seniors, not a big influx, move to the larger centres. As they get older, they get very nervous and not been handy services. And in West Prince here, we lobby hard when we see gaps in the system. And I'll give you just a small example. I'm on the O'Leary Community Health Foundation. We lobbied 4 years for an occupational therapist. 4 years before we even got one to share with the other community. So when people get frail and elderly and have a lot of travel, and travel is a big concern for a lot of seniors, trying to get to their appointments, so that sometimes has an effect on us for sure. And our young people that one time, if you were a nurse or a teacher, you didn't have to worry about work. I got a granddaughter in high-level Alberta. Cannot get a job here in Prince Edward Island. So those are the things we're facing. So I don't know if there's any simple answer. But it's certainly, I think, as volunteers and people wanting to keep our communities alive, we'd like to at least have that opportunity to have another 10 years with a little bit more variance to try and work on that. And now that we've got a rural development minister in West Prince, we could see big and better things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Andrea Richard, and I live in Union, District 26. I have chicken scratches, so forgive me if I bounce around. I think when we talk about services in rural PEI, I think that's the part where growth and development kind of depends on services. And so when we see our communities and towns struggling to grow and develop, but they don't have the financial resources to actually provide services, it's kind of like catch-22. You want to grow, but you've taken all the financial resources away. And in order to grow, you need to provide, whether it be infrastructure or childcare or programming or what have you. So government should continually engage the population. And so how am I engaged in my community? It's through my kids' school, through their sports. We live outside the town, so we don't have a counselor. You can engage with government through local government, such as municipal councilors. When you live outside of a town, you rely on your MLA. And so for areas like Charlottetown, Summerside, Stratford, larger areas with councillors with very defined roles and responsibilities, you have 2 people to go to because the councillor map falls in line with the MLA map. And so for a very small area, you have 2 people to go to. But when you get to rural Prince Edward Island, you have an MLA to go to. And I'm not sure how you change that, whether that be growing towns, putting resources back in communities so that they can grow. And one thing that I have noticed is we talk a little bit about population density when we're talking about our school review. It's really difficult to increase population density in rural PEI when there's ribbon development. So people build houses along roads that already exist. You can't increase the density of a population without an urban plan. So our communities, whether they be small or large, they all need an urban plan. And so the services that are lacking are everything from healthcare, programming for children. Those attract people, those attract families. When you get into smaller communities, those things aren't as available. And so...
So you are in a real catch-22.
Yeah, you have to have the services to attract people, but if you don't have the money to provide the services, you don't have the services. And so funding based on numbers doesn't work because you will not grow if that's the case. And so there's, District 26 is growing, and if you drive along any road that's close to the Cascambek Bay area, the Mill River, the thing that's drawing people are the natural, beautiful things. The river, it's the recreational river. So that area is growing because of the river. Because it's, and when we moved here, I was not familiar with river life. It is actually incredible how many boats drive past our house on a nice sunny day. Because it's the river that draws people. And so there hasn't been a municipal plan or a rural development plan. It's the actual physical feature that's drawing people. But you can't grow and develop and increase a population without services and without funding and without resources. And so in order to grow those populations, you need to possibly be a little more flexible with the numbers tied to electoral boundaries. And I was curious if the municipal wards maps lined up, because that would be kind of helpful if you had one MLA to go to, if you, for example, Summerside and Charlottetown, if you look at the ward maps and you look at your proposed maps, is there a way to simplify it so that, you know, the wards 4 through 8 are all one MLA? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they're done that way. But
no, but
I
like
know
it would be.
I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
Well, then when you're revising a map, you're revising fewer maps in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all I have to say. My chicken scratches get really messy.
Any questions? Thank you.
Hello and good evening. My name is Audrey Callahan, and I'm in the Catch-22. I'd like to say that my comments are mostly the same as Joseph's, because we're in the same Catch-22, and Ronnie. So my comments are going to be very brief. In our area, I'm in 26, half of my community is in 27, and the other half is with me. So we are a municipality. So our municipality is split in two. So maybe it's a liability, maybe it's an asset, I don't know, because if you can't get something from one ML, you might get it from the other MLA.
That's right.
But when voting time comes, I'd like you just to listen to some of the language. Sometimes when they come in to vote and they say, no, you don't belong here. You have to go to someplace else in Alberton, to the Manor maybe. So that's one thing that we hope that'll be, I see, but the map could be fixed up. We could be in 27, or maybe they're going to decide to put us in 26, everybody. I'm not sure of that. We'll have to wait and see. The other thing is 55% of the taxes are from rural PEI. So I think that should have some bearing on the representation. And if you follow the rep by population, we should only have 1 or 2 MPs for the island. And I don't know if you'd be happy about that, but I wouldn't be happy about that. As I kind of think when this is all divided up, we may be losing one of our MLAs, and that I would not be happy about. I think we should all have the same representation. If the Charlottetown and Summerside think they should have more than we do, I don't think that's right, and I don't think that should be the way it's divided up. And most of our industries are from rural PEI, as the other people have said. The MLAs, like Eva says, cover a lot of territory, and we're in that situation. We're not like in Charlottetown. Before we want to go to a government agency, now we got to go to Charlottetown. One time we could go to the O'Leary Service Centre. Most of those are dried up. So we have to make the long trek to Charlottetown, 2 hours each way. And if you folks come up here, it seems like it's only a one-way thing. We go to Charlottetown. We go to Charlottetown. If you come up to a meeting...
The service centers are closed?
Well, they're not closed, but they don't have the services
They don't have the services.
that they used to have. Things are drying up. So when you folks come up here for a meeting, it's at 10 o'clock in the morning. If we go to Charlottetown, it's maybe 8 o'clock in the morning. It seems to be a difference. And like we say, the road goes both ways. So that's my comments, and I hope you take into consideration the comments of the other people, because they are a lot similar to what I have on here, and I'm not going to go through the same thing twice. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jerry Gavin. I'm the mayor of the town of O'Leary. I'm a little bit nervous here, so
just take your time.
I could go either way or so whatever. And I've been in municipality politics for probably 30 years, so pretty well have a general idea how things work, how things don't work. Biggest concern that the town of O'Leary has, and if you look at version 1, is that, like Ronnie said, it looks like as if the town of O'Leary is going to be cut right into, or pretty close to that. And it's pretty hard to deal with two MLAs. And like I said, I got nothing against Robbie, or I got nothing against Pat. I've known Pat for probably 50 years. I've known Robbie for, as long as he's been in politics. And I just looked at it, and then we've been trying to get our Main Street paved in O'Leary for probably 2 or 3 years now. We finally got it. It's finally going to happen, but I'm just thinking, if we had to have 2 MLAs and both on both sides of the road, it may never happen maybe for 10 years, for sure. With people's kind of, yes, and I can understand the numbers, and yes, they're doing a good job, and everybody's got a great presentation here. The biggest thing is that the MLAs out there. I don't know if people realize of how much work and how much information and how much whatever we get from MLAs. I call Robbie at least maybe 3 times a week. Sort of kidding to me, he said, there's only his wife's number 1 on his cell phone, I'm number 2. And that's what he says. I guess what it is, the biggest thing you don't realize, and as the town of O'Leary, and people think we just work for the town of O'Leary. That's incorrect. We work for Bloomfield, we work for Knutsford, we work forever. And you got to do that because the town of O'Leary can't survive on its own. There's no way in the world it can do that. The concern is we got, and if you look at version 1, District 26 seems like it's going to swallow quite a bit of stuff, especially at West Point and Coleman and to wherever else. In that area. Version 3.1 looks like it's only going to take up the Glengarry area pretty well. We totally understand something's got to change here and to whatever else. Biggest concern is we have, don't take too much too fast. Like in other words, don't gobble all that West Point, don't gobble all that area. Yes, and maybe the Glengarry area may be enough. We don't know that for sure. You people would have to decide that. Maybe from the other end where Paula Bigger is, maybe if she's got to come this way some, maybe she'll have to do that. Sort of understanding also, in talking to Robbie, that, yeah, this is a big area here. This is, a matter of fact, this is the biggest fire district in PEI. Area-wise, it is the fire district. And it's got to be hard for that man to go from, like I said, from West Point to O'Leary to Enmore to wherever it is. It's got to be. There's got to be a tremendous. And yeah, and if, like I said, if you had to take a little bit from one end and maybe a little bit from the other end, but leave it mostly, just don't gobble it all up and to one area here. That seems to be our biggest problems. And you said, and I know how much that Robbie works. I know how much Pat works, and I know how much Hal works. And because I just consider of how much that I do, they do about 10 times as much, and I can understand that. And that's the only thing that concerns me, is that if you got to deal with 2 MLAs in your area, and especially if it's a close area, I really don't, and I shouldn't say this, and I'm not, and I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying this, I don't think it happens as easy, you know what I mean? You know, and like I said, I get nothing against Pat, and I get nothing against Robbie, and I get nobody against Nick. And like I said, I understand is how much as hard as they work. But you said of only paving Main Street, for example, if we had to wait for both MLAs to make that decision, maybe 10 years from now we'd be still looking to get the thing done. You know, that seems to be the biggest thing, like, for us. And I guess as people's got to realize is that as mayor and councilors, we're working for more than the town of O'Leary. You also asked of what the communities have done in the last little while. The last election, when we went into the last election in 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, we put a mandate on the table for ourselves. And what it was a seniors home that, sorry to say, we are in the process of meeting tomorrow with plans to allocation or to whatever else to get that done. Libby's on the committee with me. She does a hell of a good job. We have constructed, we are in the plans of a new strip mall with 2 to 3 businesses. We had 2 that's very interested, maybe 3, maybe 4. We're into the process of right now talking to the contractors for that. We have also, we bought we bought 35 acres of land that we want to put a subdivision in, and we wanted more people to move in to that area. And we want people to move into everywhere, Bloomfield and Woodstock and Coleman. We want people to move everywhere. But the biggest problem is we had no room. So we're in the process right now. We're meeting with the engineer. We're going to have 10 lots available by this fall. And the next lots, the second phase of that is 25 more. We're growing. We're starting to grow here. We're trying to grow here. And the biggest thing about it is that you said you got to have your politicians. You got to have your Pat Murphys. You got to have your Robbie Hendersons. And if you don't have this, or like I said, it's harder to get things done with 2. Sorry to say, and I shouldn't say that, and I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying that. That seems to be the biggest concern for myself and the town of O'Leary. And I said, I've been in municipal politics for 30 years. I pretty well have a general idea what's going on. I pretty well got a very good general idea how things work. I'm maybe not the smartest man in the world, and I'm not saying that I am. But that's one thing that we are very concerned about, is that, yes, we understand that you gotta do something, and I can understand that. But don't gobble too much. Don't turn around and say District 26. Now you're going to go from wherever you stop. Now you're going to come all the way into Knutsford. No, that's too much. But if you're just going to take out a little place around Glengarry or to whatever, it wouldn't be that bad. And from Paula's area, if you had to come more this way, and like I said, if you think that maybe this has got to be a little bit smaller, maybe that's the idea also. I don't know. I know you people has got a very big job ahead of you, but like I said, we just don't want you to jump too fast, because I think if you jump too fast, it's going to make it very hard on the small towns of Alberton, Tignish, and O'Leary, because you're going to start squeezing here, and I honestly don't think that's going to work. Craig, thank you for.
Thank you, Mayor Gavin. Question?
Hey, Eric,
Question?
come back to the microphone if that's all right. Eric, I just wanted to clarify and make sure I have my numbers right here. You're projecting, because we're looking 10 years ahead,
Yes.
You're projecting that you're going to have 10 lots for this fall, 25 more in the next phase. You're also projecting a seniors home within the next 10 years as well.
Yes.
Are you aware of any other residential complexes or anything of that nature developing in the O'Leary area?
Not right now, Libby. I think we just want to. We don't want to take too much on one term. I know there's a new church being built, and I know there's a few little things besides that. But as a town, this is the 3 projects that we are doing ourselves.
You're going to have a nice new rink, aren't you? That's going to attract some more people.
Yeah, listen, we're hoping Saturday night that there's announced that there used to be a hockey game played in there sometime this fall, right? You know, and that's great, and that's a big thing also.
Sure.
And you said, I don't know what everybody else is doing, but I know as businesses come, people will come, you know, and people will move into these areas. And like I said, you know, we know that this seniors facility is needed, and we do meet whatever else, and Libby's on it, and Ronnie's on it. There's 10 really good people on this thing. But also you got to remember, we also got help from Mr. Henderson besides, you know. So.
Thank you.
Anything else, Libby?
I'm good.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Eric McKenna. I'm from District 26. And Libby, you totally confused me when you started talking to Eric. But that's okay. I came in late. I apologize for that. I may have missed this question already. Maybe somebody asked it. But are we sure that we are not going to lose any rural districts or candidates from the rural districts through this whole shuffle?
Well, what we can tell you is that we start with 27 districts and we'll end with 27 districts.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Daniel McDonald. I'm probably one of the only fellows here from Glengarry. A couple of small points. They're not really small, but the areas or districts can't really follow roads. Like you take the O'Halloran Road, the way it sits right now, that's the divider between 26 and 25. And for a lot of people, they feel like they should be in 25, and a lot of people feel they should be in 26. And it's the same even down the Harmony Road, the other end of 25. It's the same there. They don't feel that they should be in 25. They feel it should be in 24. So like I think right across the province is probably that way. And like Ronnie had mentioned about certain polling areas, same case, you know, there's people that should be voting in this poll, but they're not, and you know, it frustrates a lot of them, and then they don't go to vote because instead of driving 2 kilometers, they got to drive 20. Mm-hmm. And I feel that we shouldn't lose any representation in rural PEI. We seem to have an awful struggle to keep the things that we have here right now, and you know, losing a district or a representative will only make things worse for rural PEI. So like those are some of my concerns. Some of your proposed maps.
We don't use proposed, we say sample.
Sample map, sorry, sample. Your 3.11, how it goes down, District 26 goes down like so far into, I believe it's O'Leary, Knutsford, Mount Royal. Like it just, I feel that you know, this should take longer than till May or June, and a few, you know, 13 or 14 public meetings to decide some of these boundaries, because you know, like we're only a small sample of people here from West Prince tonight, and you know, could be a lot of factors that we overlook. And like just from that sample map there, like we'll just say if that was the map that was adopted in May or June, well, you know, myself, I'd be very disappointed. You know, I consider myself a part of O'Leary, the O'Leary area, and to be put in a different district, it don't feel that great. So, and the other one, it's not as much of a as much of a difference as the 3.1 one, but still, being in Glengarry, I would be a part of District 26. So those are, like I said, those are some of my concerns, and hopefully you'll take them into consideration.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we tell them that if they think there are certain communities that should be together, that they should?
Good evening. Okay.
My colleague here was suggesting, and I think it's good, if you think, that's anybody here, that certain communities should be sure to go with each other, these have always been part of a neighborhood or a natural grouping. Please let us know that, because you can't assume that we know. And part of the reason we're here is to find out that kind of thing. The gentleman just said, well, he considers Glengarry part of the O'Leary area, and he wants to be in that. So that's the kind of thing that we hope to glean from these public meetings. It's things that we wouldn't have any way of knowing ourselves. It depends on local knowledge. Anyway, I'll just throw that out there, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No worries. My name is Hal Perry, and I'm the MLA for District 27. So I want to welcome you to West Prince, to Libby's neighborhood. And Dan had just mentioned there's a small sample here, but of the 12 meetings that you had so far, this is probably the largest turnout. There's a little over 40 people here. So that just shows how well we're engaged here in West Prince and rural PEI. It's not a very interesting topic to most people. A lot of the times they just don't understand it, or they just don't have any, they believe they don't have any input that's valuable to it. So they allow us to come here and voice our opinions for them. And with that voice, it also goes to conversations I've had with my colleagues from the urban districts on PEI. And in that conversation, we talk about the difference in our constituents' needs. And it is considerable difference. I know we have Constituency Day on Mondays, for instance, primarily because when the House is open, we sit from Tuesday to Friday. So Monday is known as Constituency Day. There are many of the urban districts that don't see anyone at all on Mondays, where we can have a lineup meet us at the door when we go in, because we are the go-to person for everything. Everything, whether it's government or even direction from the outside government. And it could be from someone just looking for a PEI flag, to employment, to grant applications. And I would say most of the time, help them actually fill out that grant application, to make phone calls to Charlottetown, to the departments that are there for clarification, and just to assist them in every request that they possibly have. So with that, another difference is that in rural PEI, every one of my constituents know who I am. They know who my wife is, they know who my kids are, they know where I was, where I should be. But I also know them, and I know, who they are and what their history is, and it makes it easier for me to do my job. It makes it easier for them to know a little bit about me and where I am, and they can always approach me, whether it be at my constituency office, at the arena, or somewhere in the communities. Where in the urban centers, I find the MLA can walk down the street and the majority of the constituents don't even recognize them. So we have a larger area too also. So in the urban centers, you have a smaller footprint of coverage, but in the rural PEI, we have a larger area. And in the municipalities that we represent, whether they're incorporated or unincorporated, they all have specific needs. At the present time, and it was mentioned here many times tonight, but it's worth mentioning again, The boundaries do separate communities. It was mentioned St. Louis, St. Edward, Ebbsfleet, and Memmany-Gash between Tignish, Palmer Road, and Alberton, Roseville, where there is some confusion for voters or constituents as to where their poll is and who they're actually voting for. So I would like to see the boundaries more distinguishable and more visible, because there are other areas in my district where there could be a road, but the boundary is between the second and the third house to the south of that road. So it makes it difficult to know, again, not only for the MLAs or the candidates, sorry, to knock on those doors, and for the MLAs once they're elected as who they represent, but also for the voters as to where they go to vote. When they go to a poll and they're told, no, this is not your poll, you know, they are a little upset, and they may have a tendency to say, you know, I'm not going to do this. I'm going home. You don't want me to vote, I'm going home. You're making it too difficult. So those are some of the concerns I have regarding the boundaries and the distinction of those boundaries between communities. You talked about looking at population. So, of course, I'm advocating for a larger variance for the rural PEI, for the rural districts. I would really dislike it if one of our rural districts was pushed into an urban center, and that on one of the sample maps is the case, where we're actually losing one in the west and one in the east. So I would prefer not to have that happen. It was mentioned many times tonight that much of our economy on PEI is driven from rural PEI, or within our fishing, farming, and our tourism industries. And in the community of, or the district of 27, fishing and agriculture are primaries. There's 4 ports in that, in my district. One of them is actually split right down the center. So one side of the harbor is 26, one side is 27. One of those harbors is the largest small craft harbor in Atlantic Canada. Another one is the third largest, on the island. So we have the first and third on the island for size. They are the economic drivers of that district. We also, or what was mentioned earlier too, was the cultural integrity of the areas. In my district, we do have a large Acadian population with a very long history, cultural history, and they are always working very hard to keep that and educate others on their culture. In Tignish, it was in 1799, was founded by 7 Acadian families. St. Louis was the first school chosen on PEI to introduce the French immersion program. So culturally, we would like to keep that within one district also, instead of splitting them in half, let's say. The responsibilities of an MLA is what I started off with. Now let's add to that again, because I was just making notes tonight, so you have to bear with me. They're all over the place. I am on 6 different committees. Those meetings are always held in Charlottetown. It is a 2-hour commute one way, so it's 4 hours out of my day to go there and back. So basically, if there's a standing committee meeting in Charlottetown, most of my day is spent either on the road or in Charlottetown. It's spent away from my constituency. Whereas if I was in an urban center or urban district in Charlottetown, you know, I could go, leave home 10 minutes prior to the meeting and be home 10 minutes after. Still have time to do my constituency work.
You're on 6 committees. Would that be normal for MLA to be on that many committees? It's probably not normal, but due to the numbers, it is. And I have an interest in those 6. I selected those 6 because I have an interest, because they represent my district also, whether it's economic development, whether it's agriculture and fisheries, which I chair. I want to know what's going on. And I want to bring the concerns of my district to Charlottetown. That's what I was elected for. I was elected to be their voice and to advocate on behalf of not only my constituents, but the businesses and the communities within. So being part of those committees and being a voice in those committees is very important.
So what I'm trying to get at there is that there is a huge difference being a rural MLA from being an urban MLA. I'm not saying that we don't work harder.
Can I ask you one more question? You're in Charlottetown all those times. Now, if you've got a constituent who wants to get in touch with you, how does he do it?
They can go to my office in Tignish is at Access. So they go to Access PEI and I will get a message. I probably do the majority of my constituency work on Facebook, inboxing.
Okay. So it's not, but would any of them have to make long-distance telephone calls?
Yes, they do.
They do?
Yeah. So what they'll do at times is they'll Google the Legislative Assembly. They got my number. It is a toll-free number, though.
You have it. Do all MLAs have a toll-free number?
They should all have a toll-free number.
I know they should, but do they?
I know I do.
Okay.
The number that calls in.
No,
our
it came
office
up
is a
at another
number.
meeting that we're at, and they didn't seem to think.
Unless they specifically dial a different number that was in that office, they may not have that toll-free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
But that doesn't happen that often for me. Majority of my calls come in through Access in Tignish because they know that my office is there, and again, Facebook is a great tool to use, but it still doesn't keep you from that face-to-face because many of our constituents are senior citizens who need a little bit of help. They need you to sit down at their kitchen table, help them fill out a form, or just to listen to them. So they do require that face-to-face, and they do appreciate it. Part of I know this is not all on numbers. The parity that you're trying to find is not all based on numbers. So I would like to say, have you considered the population that are now 8 to 18 years old, and what those numbers are, and what they may be in 4 years' time, or 8 years' time, because they will come into play for at least 3 elections moving forward. Also, the temporary foreign workers was brought up several times today, and they are increasing their numbers in the West, and they hopefully will have status that they are able to vote in an upcoming election. So our population is increasing in that sense.
You think they will become citizens?
We hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. They're a valued asset to our communities. Yeah.
So if they do that, there'll be no longer temporary workers, but
at that time they'd be Canadian citizens.
Be real residents.
Yeah. Royal Star Foods, Tignish Fisheries is the largest employer west of Summerside. And that's in District 27 too. That's where the majority of those temporary foreign workers presently are employed in this district. They are employed, of course, in other processing plants and farms in District 26 and 25 also. Just going through my notes. I think I covered everything that I wanted to say. Distinguished lines was probably the primary. In 27, because of restrictions of the water, our boundaries can only go in one direction. So that could be an advantage to the people in that district, because we're going to go into other, well, we definitely have to go into 26 if there is an expansion of numbers needed. But keep in mind, again, the municipalities, whether they're incorporated or unincorporated, keep that in mind that they also have boundaries and they should be represented as a whole. So I want to thank you for your opportunity, and if you have any more questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Questions?
I have a question.
Sure, Libby.
Same question or style of question which I addressed with Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of future development, subdivision, things of that nature within the next 10 years? You see an area developing more?
I am aware. There are talks underway now at this present time for the community of Tignish to do an expansion in that area for businesses, several businesses. There's also discussion on an expansion to the seniors home in Tignish. And this is just in conversation. There's no set plans in this, but the generation that I grew up in, we were one of the smaller families. We had 7. Neighbors had 12. The opposite side of the road had 10. And the expectations at that time primarily were to try to finish school and maybe work at the plant or go fishing with somebody, right? Now the families are much smaller, and the expectations are to go on to post-secondary and go away and find a good job. So there's nothing more I would like to see is to bring those people back, and they are talking about coming back either to raise their families, I guess they're a bit younger than I am, to raise their families here because they like the quality of life that rural PEI offers. But in order to do that, we have to increase the number of sustainable, high-paying jobs. And that's something that I take very seriously and I'm working on. And so we hope to see some new businesses that offer that so we can actually bring people back to this area also.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sylvie.
No.
I wasn't actually planning to speak. Chair, committee members, the Honorable Jamie Fox, the leader of the opposition for the province of Prince Edward Island. I have the very unique opportunity of traveling the island and hearing from islanders from tip to tip on a regular basis. And I can say that there's a real feeling out there in rural PEI that it's being lost. And it was really, I think, has come to light over the last little while with the issue with the schools. And it was also compounded with the Municipalities Act that came in last year through the House. And there's a feeling that, we talk about a strong rural PEI and that it is the backbone of PEI, and if we do not have a strong economic growth in rural PEI, that of course the cities will not grow, and that's a very true fact. One thing I can tell you as an MLA is that it's being a rural MLA is very unique in being available to the constituents in the area. To answer a question that was raised a little while ago, not all MLAs have an office. I can tell you that. Hal is very lucky he has an office in Access PEI. I do not have an office actually provided to me by the government. Sidney McEwen doesn't. Different MLAs across the island do not. We do not have access to a toll-free number. We of course we have cell phones that are paid for by the government member's office or the opposition office, but the constituents that call us on them numbers are calling long distance. And in my case, I receive a lot of long distance telephone calls from constituents, in different areas across the island. And it really causes confusion in some areas where, for example, we'll talk to South Shore Villa. My boundary in District 19 goes through the South Shore Villa. So if the seniors that live in that building are on the top floor, they call me. If they live on the bottom floor, they call Peter Bevan Baker.
You're kidding.
No, I am not. So it can get as very confusing as that. And a little while ago, somebody talked about paved roads. You take the County Line Road or the Blue Shank Road. I do all the Blue Shank Road up to a point, and then I divide it. Well, you got a guy calling me up saying he wants his road paved. Well, does that fall under capital, or does that fall under Matt McKay's allotment of recap, or does it fall under Jamie Fox's? Well, on average, an MLA gets about 2.5 kilometers of recap a year. So you take the Blue Shank Road or the County Line Road, whose recap's that going to come out of? Well, I don't want it to come out of mine because I can't just do half a road. And that's, some of the realities that MLAs deal with. And you get the constituent that lives on one side of the road, and he'll call you over a problem, a personal problem, or something that he or she needs help with. And, well, you can't just say to the person, well, you got to call Hal because he takes care of that side of the road, or Pat because he takes care of that side of the road. But that's the reality that MLAs and PEI deal with. And I think we need to look at a more of a way of using rivers or more structured boundaries instead of the left side or the right side. I'm very unique in my district where I'm an urban and a rural MLA. I have 5 community councils
in District 19 that I deal with. And I have constituents in part of my rural urban area of Summerside, who 2 subdivisions, that why am I dealing with a rural MLA? So, you know, I hear that across the island in different localities and stuff like that. I want to say that I've been part of this process from the very start. You know, I was part of the individual that was on the board, or I was one of the individuals that appointed this committee, and I applaud you for accepting, you know, our request for you to be appointed to this. I think we have a very capable committee sitting here, and I think you'll make very wise decisions. And I think we must remember that every demographic location in PEI, or every different location, is different. And they all have different concerns, and they are part of different families. And we must make sure that we don't divide them families and them constituent areas, and put it forward. And a little while ago, somebody mentioned about, is this process the end process? Yes, you do have the final say. But we as legislators, of course, we can do the change the act, you know, which I would not support. And I will openly say that I would not support your recommendations being changed in the House. And I will stand up against that. But please, I ask that do not forget rural PEI. I think they have a very big part to play in this island. And I think their community and family groups and the different beliefs are very, very much important to think of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Yes, sir.
Hello, John Handrahan. I'm a resident of in District 27. I'd like to thank the committee for their work, following it online. I just had stood up to support Mr. McDonald's point, but Mr. Fox also supported it very well, in that I think while I support equal representation within the boundaries, that your work for supporting communities of interest is very important as well. That doesn't seem to impact District 27 greatly as other areas, but I think that it is important. And as Mr. McDonald and Mr. Fox pointed out, it comes down to roads in many cases. And I think your committee actually pointed out first tonight that it's very simple to put the dividing line down the road, but that roads are communities of interest. Yeah. That if, whether it's a polling station or the electoral boundary line, that when you divide neighbors by the road, then you're dividing a community of interest. By just taking a look at 3.1, this stands out most glaringly in Districts 19 and especially District 16. Especially District 16, there's a small tail that jags up north. Well, that's following two roads. I can't see from the map. Then you definitely are dividing neighbors. PEI has a very good GIS system from a committee that I sat on a few years ago, that it should be relatively easy to divide along the backs of property lines rather than by roads. I know that must have been the easy way to do it years ago, but the technology has developed. And that would eliminate a lot of the problems where I'm on this side of the road or this side of a line and my neighbor isn't. So, yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bottle of shine. Good evening, folks. My name is Pat Murphy, and I'm the MLA here in the Albert and Roseville District. And I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. It's probably putting in a lot of hours and listening to a lot of people. It's a very important job. And my concern, I guess, is, like many others have spoken here tonight, is that possibility that we could lose some rural representation across the province if this committee strives for parity instead of community of interest. I think community of interest is pretty important. It's probably more important than striving for parity, as was mentioned here tonight many times. There is quite a difference between the role of an urban MLA and a rural MLA. In the cities, they have the city councils, as was spoken to earlier, but they also, in Charlottetown, they also have the government bureaucracy there that plays a big influence on many decisions that are made across the province. So I think there's plenty of representation in the urban parts of the province. And I think too maybe that I know when I was reading your pamphlet there that there is some emphasis put on the Canadian Charter, but and you can correct me if I'm wrong here or not, but I think is this committee operating under our current provincial legislation where there is allowance for a 25% variance?
Well, the variance can't be more than 25% under the Act. It doesn't say 25% is allowed. Just says that in any circumstances, it can't be more or less
but you can
than
go
25%.
You can go up to 25. You'd be allowed to go up
given proper circumstances, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would like us to take that into consideration. And a couple other things too I'd ask that you might take into consideration. I think there's going to be a population strategy released here in the province in the not too distant future. And I think also with the recent appointment of a new ministry here in the province of rural and regional development, that this government is committed to rural Prince Edward Island, which should mean hopefully that there's going to be more of a population growth in the rural parts of the province. And I know in Alberton's case, I think in the last census, the town has actually seen some growth in that in population. And in the business community in Alberton now, the holes that were along Main Street there are starting to slowly fill up. So I think things are turning around, and I'm hoping that there is a bright future for rural Prince Edward Island, and we certainly want to make sure that we keep the rural representation that we have now. And I'll just check over my hand scratches here too, see if there's anything I missed. And I know now, like getting out around the district and during the election, it's probably a bigger task in the rural parts of the province to get to every door in your district because of the wider area that you have to cover. So that, although a minor concern, I think it still might be something that might be taken into consideration. And if you have any questions of me, I made presentations at the last boundary commissions too, but at that time I was in the role of the mayor of the town of Alberton, and
they were running
three
through your
different
town.
maps.
You had to stop them.
Yeah, yeah.
I read about that.
Yeah.
This is just a point I want to make to you because you brought up about the 25%, and perhaps I wasn't clear enough. While 25% is the maximum set out in the Electoral Boundaries Act,
right?
The charter, where the charter comes in, is that the Supreme Court of Canada decided a case having to do with Saskatchewan's boundaries. And that's the leading case on electoral boundaries law. And it says that parity is the main consideration, but it can be counterbalanced by other factors like the difficulty that it is in serving a urban, rural community compared with an urban, or some other. There's other factors: community of interest, language and culture. These things. But so, while 25 is the far end of it, the charter would seem to suggest something considerably less.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And good luck in your
Thank you.
deliberation.
Stay. Same questions that we addressed with Hal and with Eric. Not sure if you were here for the.
I was, but if you just want to repeat it and make it easier for my old memory to.
Sure. Are you aware of any future development happening within your district in areas of growth within the next several years, 3 elections? Are you aware of things that are taking place right now in particular areas of growth in your area?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, Alberton is one of the communities in West Prince that has seen growth. And there is efforts, the town council there is very conscious of it. They purchased a subdivision on their own and are slowly getting some growth going there. And I think with the population, the new population strategy, I think there's probably going to be more of an emphasis from the provincial government to see the rural population grow.
Much of that rests on the shoulders of the new minister.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's John Martin from O'Leary. I was going to comment on, I guess it's a community of interest theme, but at the same time it has an economic development twist to it. Before coming here, I took a look at the annual budget for the city of Charlottetown and the city of Summerside, 40 million and 20 million respectively. And as a volunteer on various committees in the West Prince area, I've had the occasion to sort of work on some things from the grassroots up. The housing initiative that Mayor Gavin mentioned to be one of them, Libby and the mayor and myself, and Ronnie, he's still here, yeah, are part of that. And also I'm on a board that provides transportation services for people in the area. And when I look at an issue like transportation in a rural area, pretty significant, you need a car. No taxis, no public transit. PEI is one of the few provinces in Canada that does not have a public transit service, except we do have a public transit service between the city of Charlottetown and the city of Summerside, and which is a good thing. I'm not criticizing that. It's a great service. Primarily, it's people who work in one community and travel to the other, as well as some students. They have a tax base that can subsidize, those two cities can subsidize that service along with a certain amount of federal support. Quite often in a community, when you're working on developing something that's good for your community, you seek some support from your levels of government. Quite often, the support, especially if you're involving a federal partner, requires a third. And looking at the budgets for the town of O'Leary and Alberton and Tignish, they're all around 800 and some thousand. And their populations are similar, between 820 and 1,000 people roughly. And not to take anything away from the town of O'Leary, the town of O'Leary has been extremely generous in a variety of options for that particular initiative that we're working on together. But they're limited. They're very limited in terms of what they are able to contribute from their budgets of $800 and some thousand in partnering with us. So quite often, we look to our MLAs for some ideas, support, direction, and quite often what you're looking for is an MLA who's willing to use maybe a hockey analogy. I live in O'Leary. A breakaway, do a bit of a breakaway, and use a bit of political capital to try and support that initiative if it means something to that community and so on. So my point is, with the structures that we have now, with our democratically elected structures, very often when we're looking at making some significant change or development in our communities, your local MLA is a very important part of that discussion that needs to take place. And to think of having fewer MLAs in the scheme of things, because they have to head off to town to negotiate on our behalf or to advocate on our behalf, to think of having fewer when our needs are so great, it's a rather disturbing thought to me. So that's the point I was wanting to make.
Thank you.
My name is Alan Shaw. Just quite pleased with the turnout, quite pleased with the consideration that was given to the various presentations. Familiar with your board, familiar with the type of task. I had the fortune or misfortune to have sat on one of these previously. I believe our recommendations were all accepted. And we didn't have the luxury of having them committed to law. At any rate, I want to speak about a couple of things that are of interest. I believe, don't believe I have anything that I can add concretely to the presentations that previous speakers have made. Other than I might suggest to Hal, if he's going north, he might consider annexing the Magdalens. But I don't suspect that's within your mandate. However, I look at the task that's before you, and it's a monumental task. And you say, I've heard numerous talks about driving to polls. And I don't know if this is within the mandate of this group or a recommendation should ever even be made or thought about, but it would seem to me that when you're talking less than 4,000 voters in a district, what difference what poll he votes in? Yeah. Like, come on. You must have a voters list. So if you have a voters list, why should I have to vote in a particular poll? Just doesn't make sense. No. However, I'll leave you with the thought, I realize variances have been beat to death, but it reminded me when I was sitting with the story about the statistician. And and I realize you'll have to deal with people of that ilk. But there was one time, and he drowned in a lake with an average depth of 1 foot.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to West Prince. My name is Alan McGuinness. I'm the chairman of Tignish, I guess mayor in waiting, because we were becoming a town on the 1st of April.
I heard that on the radio.
Yeah. So anyway, earlier there was a question asked to you, Mr. President, if there was any change in the amount of districts, and you said no, that there were still going to be 27. I would have asked the question, are they going to be in the same place as they are now? That's my question. You can't answer that now, but you can answer it later on.
Well, I can answer it now.
I'm just hoping that
they'll not be in the same place, and I'll tell you why. Because as soon as you move one, you move them all.
I understand that, but I'm just hoping that there's more in the rural areas than in the urban areas. One other thing that I'd like to speak about, Libby is quite concerned over development in our areas. Hal didn't speak too clearly on what was going on in Tignish because I'm in charge of Tignish, he's in charge of District 27. But anyway, we have some development, yes, in the near future. We have one project that we're beginning that I can't specify what it is, but hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years, that it will be a substantial attraction to the tourist trade in Prince Edward Island, especially with more cruise ships coming in. We also have waiting on an application for land development in our community, which probably will put in more housing, apartments or duplexes. Our population did increase in the last few years, and most of the foreign workers that work at our Royal Star do live right in the community of Tignish. So that's a great thing for our community.
Now, excuse me, just on that. Are they living there year-round, or
if I'm correct, and I can be corrected, some sign a contract for more than a year, possibly 2 years, and I know there's one that got married, and I think she's staying here in the last 6 months or so. They're buying vehicles, okay. And they're, I think, if I'm not mistaken, some of them even invested in some property in the hopes of realizing their life here in Canada in the future. So I'm very proud that they're good workers, they're very good citizens. Most, of course, in Tignish, they're Catholics, and they go to the Catholic Church, and they profess their religion, quite profound. So I'm very proud of that as well. But the biggest thing that bothers me is what you had said earlier, that you're not familiar with the new municipal act that's coming out. And a friend of mine over here spoke about the smaller communities. And if we were to lose some of our rural districts into the urban areas, I'm afraid that it may impact our smaller communities and make it very difficult. I know that in the future they're looking at amalgamating outlying areas into the larger areas, like into the towns and cities. But I'm hoping that your decision will protect our rural area, because as far as I'm concerned, in the last number of years, we've been hit a little, and I don't care to be hit in our rural areas because we work so hard. And there's some things that our communities work for, that we work for by ourselves, of course, with the help of our MLA, Hal Perry, and he said he was involved in a lot of committees, but he is a going concern in our district. I can speak for some of the other MLAs as well, but I'll only speak for Hal. I know that I visit him probably 2 or 3 times a month, or I call him, or I text him, or whatever, and he gives me great response. And earlier, there was a question also on that, where I think MLA Jamie Fox said that it was hard for some of the constituents to contact him, but Centrix system is there, so if he wants to give his number out to the public, they shouldn't have a problem getting him. You don't need a toll-free number, you just go through Centrix, and the government pays for that. So anything other than that, I appreciate what you guys are going through, but I just hope that you take into consideration that the rural areas are, as far as I'm concerned, more important than the urban areas of Charlottetown and different areas like that, because we are the backbone of Prince Edward Island, with the farmers and fishermen in our rural areas. And without the rural areas, Prince Edward Island would be a lot less than what it is today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Luann Gallant, and I come from the community of Mimnegash. And I'm one of the communities that were split down the middle. I live on Harbor Road, and so the street is here, so I'm in Pat's riding, and the people on the other side of the street's in Neil's riding. During election time, that is very difficult for people that always voted. Like, we have a poll in Mimnegash at the community center, and I've worked in that poll for years. And the big problem is we get people coming that always voted in our polls, and when they get there, they can't vote. They have to go like 20 minutes away to vote someplace else. So that's very hard on seniors, because if they're not driving, they have to get somebody to take them to a poll. But as someone that worked in the poll, when these changes were made, we have people come in and to vote, and we tell them you have to go like to Palmer Road or Elmsdale, and it's taken out on us, and we have been sworn at and saying not too nice words to us, and they get up and leave, and they said, blankets, we're not going to vote anyway. So that's one point too, that's hard. It's hard on the younger people when they come like to vote, but it's the older people too when they go to vote. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. That's a very bad situation.
I usually don't have too much to say, but I'm going to say another thing. Okay. With regard to the elderly in Charlottetown, especially, so we have an appointment, we'll say for Dr. Miller tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. So the person is 78 or 79 years old. hardly has time to have their breakfast. We got to leave home at 6 o'clock, so they got to get up at 5 o'clock, which is very inconvenient. They're not even considering us when they make an appointment. They just call you up and say, your appointment's at whatever. You don't even have time to ask them, well, could we get a later appointment, please? Bang in your ear. You know, these things are happening all the time. And with the, with the voting, oh my God. You should sit in their poll sometimes when they have to go to Elmsdale and they say, I just took 5 minutes off from work. If I had known this, I would have stayed deaf there. I wouldn't even come home to vote. It's ridiculous. So I think
a lot of those people won't vote at all then.
no, they won't vote.
Yeah.
They're just raging mad, and especially when they had to give identification. I was poll chair, and they say, I need to have 2 pieces of identification. Well, they say to me, you know who I am. No, I don't know you now, but I'll know you in a few minutes' time when you're done voting. Madder than hell, out the door.
Yeah.
No light bill, no anything. So, I mean, that's the kind of things we're facing. And like Alan says, we should be able to go into any poll and vote.
Yes.
Doesn't make any difference if it's in your 26 or 27, because they all know you in the country. I can see in the big cities where people don't know you, but around here they don't appreciate when you say you don't know them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, if not, I want to thank you for your presentations. They were terrific, and I think we learned a lot from you. And it was really perhaps our best meeting so far, certainly one of the best, if not our best. So we really appreciate your coming out and giving us your views. That's what we were looking for, and we got it. Thank you and good night.